Hello, book lovers, and welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another video. And let's just get started. So, what if I told you that one of Korea's most inventive writers started as a monk, got kicked out for talking too much, and then became a literary icon blending noir, crime, and existential dread? Today, we're talking about Kim Young-ha, one of the most provocative and boundary-pushing voices in Korean literature. So Kim Young-ha exploded onto the Korean literary scene in 1996 with the publication of his debut novel, the provocatively titled I Have the Right to Destroy Myself. A short story called Paging, published the previous year, had caught the attention of critics, but it was the ironic and at times nihilistic tone of his debut novel that really put him on the map and announced the arrival of a major new voice in Korean literature. The then 26-year-old Kim had written a novel that dealt with death, sex, and suicide, and the role of art in an increasingly consumerist Korean society. Kim has frequently said in interviews that the mid-90s were a time when suicide and what he terms the meaninglessness of life were becoming trends and talking points in South Korea. His debut sought to capture the ennui and alienation of this modern urban life in 1990s Seoul. Since its publication, critics at home and abroad have tended to see Kim's work as embodying the often seismic cultural shifts Korean culture experienced in the 1990s and 2000s. I Have the Right to Destroy Myself's unnamed narrator wanders the streets of Seoul, helping the lonely, the jaded, and the desperate to commit suicide. He designs the deaths of two women over the course of the novel and celebrates each by taking trips around Europe, where he indulges in sex and art in equal measure. After he helps the women commit suicide, he eulogizes them in short stories that try to make sense of the decision they made to die. One of the women, Judith, is romantically involved with two brothers who have dramatically different ways of surviving modern life in Seoul. The other woman is a performance artist with whom one of the brothers is briefly infatuated. The interlinking stories reveal the emptiness at the heart of modern life in an ultra-consumerist society. I Have the Right to Destroy Myself was praised for its deranged creativity, joyful cynicism, and a general sense of perverse imagination. One of Kim's earlier works, Photoshop Murder, is a fast paced, hard boiled crime story that showcases his playful engagement with classic detective fiction. Narrated by a cynical, world weary police detective in a major Korean city, the story is filled with sharp, ironic humor reminiscent of Raymond Chandler's Philip Marlowe novels. The case begins with the murder of a photo shop owner, and as the detective investigates, we encounter a femme fatale, illicit affairs, and the kind of seedy urban atmosphere that crime fiction fans love. Unlike Kim's later crime novels that subvert the genre's conventions, Photoshop Murder embraces them playfully, offering a tantalizing glimpse of what a great Korean detective series set in Seoul could be. The story was later adapted into the controversial 2004 film The Scarlet Letter. Kim Young-ha's work certainly marked a departure from the types of narratives that dominated Korean fiction in previous decades. One of the traditional themes in Korean literature up to that point had been the importance of the hometown. It's a theme that Kim was uniquely unable to connect to due to both an itinerant upbringing as the son of a military family and a bizarre childhood accident. Kim and his mother were poisoned by gas fumes from a coal briquette when they were living on a military base. As a result of the accident, Kim has no memories of his life before the age of 10. This, coupled with moving around the country, depending on where his father was stationed, meant Kim essentially had no town to call home. He always had to adapt and survive in new environments and couldn't write about a lot of the things that Korean writers had typically written about. This nomadic lifestyle as a child shaped his approach to writing, with Kim claiming that the overarching themes of his work are loneliness and adaptation. His novels are full of people adapting to new environments and dealing with some form of loneliness or social exclusion. These themes fit well with Korea, especially Seoul in the 1990s, as the country continued to move from a rural society to an increasingly urbanized one. Kim's upbringing was both unusual in some aspects and highly standard in others. Due to his father's occupation, he lived near the DMZ for a while and remembers being able to hear the propaganda broadcasts from the loudspeakers used by both the North and the South. He was raised Catholic and baptized Antonio. His aunts and uncles called him Antonio as a child, and for a time he thought this was his real name. As a high school student, he wanted to become a Franciscan monk and even embarked on the training to become one. Excuse me. However, he was expelled from the monastery he was training at for being too talkative and was kindly told that his was not the type of personality suited to life as a monk. His parents wanted him to have a stable career as an accountant, and desiring to be a good son, he enrolled at Yonsei University to study business administration. Despite being bored by the subject, he nevertheless graduated and even went on to obtain a postgraduate qualification. During this time, however, he had started writing short fiction and was seriously studying literature. 20 odd years later, and Kim Young-ha is one of Korea's most celebrated fiction writers, with a body of work including several novels, at least 2 short story collections, and an award-winning screenplay. He's won most of the major Korean literary awards, been translated into at least a dozen languages, and seen several of his stories adapted into films. Quiz Show was made into a musical, Your Republic is Calling You was made into a play, and his side projects include a popular TED Talk, a successful podcast, and a stint as a columnist at the New York Times. However, despite the acclaim, Kim has arguably never truly reached a mainstream audience, and again, arguably remains something of a cult figure to the wider reading public. So, as yet, none of his novels have cracked the top 10 bestseller list in Korea, and most of the films adapted from his books have actually all flopped, leading some in the film industry to call it the curse of Kim Young-ha. His short story collections sell more than his novels, and his biggest success in terms of sales was his translation of The Great Gatsby. Furthermore, Kim doesn't yet seem to have crossed over with international audiences in the way that his contemporaries like Han Gang and Shin Kyung-suk have. It's difficult to understand why this mainstream success has eluded Kim. His novels and short stories are frequently very accessible, modern, and usually incorporate genre elements as well as provocative subject matter like sex, death, and crime. And in some of his other novels to be translated, such as Black Flower and Your Republic is Calling You, Kim explores different aspects of Korea. Your Republic is Calling You reads like a cross between James Joyce and John le Carre, and was inspired by the North Korean propaganda broadcasts he heard as a child living next to the DMZ. The central character is a North Korean spy embedded in South Korea for decades, who one day receives the order to return home. Now, for all intents and purposes, a stereotypical middle class South Korean salaryman with an indifferent wife and troubled teenage daughter, Ki Yong spends a day traveling around Seoul, struggling to decide whether to stay in the South or return to the North. Kim says the novel reflects the idea that Koreans have an internalized psychological diaspora due to the divided nature of the country, the Korean War, and Japanese colonization. For English readers, it is a startling evocation of both modern Seoul and Korean identity politics. Kim's third novel, in translation that is, Black Flower, was seen by many as a radical departure. Black Flower is an ambitious, sweeping historical epic based on true events. In 1905, over 1,000 Koreans were duped into traveling to Mexico, where they were forced to work in the infamous haciendas in brutal conditions. Unable to return home because Korea was soon to be colonized by Japan, they were swept up in the Mexican Revolution in 1910. For a brief historical moment, the displaced Koreans set up a tragically short lived Korean nation in the jungles of Guatemala. It's an incredible story that sheds light on a little known part of Korean history. Kim stylishly weaves in a romance reminiscent of the film Titanic and savage violence reminiscent of Cormac McCarthy's Border trilogy. Reading these novels, one can understand why Kim is praised for his vast range, the ingenuity of his imagination, and the sheer variety of voices he has breathed into life. Kim has a magpie like tendency to draw inspiration from anywhere and everywhere, and taken together, his novels and short stories form a mosaic of contemporary Korean society. Love, sex, death, shopping, music, career, relationships, friendship, movies, technology, and art are all recurring themes. For example, Kim's Diary of a Murderer is a gripping psychological thriller that puts a chilling spin on the serial killer genre. This title story follows an aging former murderer suffering from Alzheimer's who struggles to determine whether he has resumed killing or if a new serial killer is targeting his adopted daughter. The novel plays with memory, identity, and unreliable narration, similar to films like Memento and Memories of Murder, blending crime fiction with a tragic meditation on aging and morality. The collection also includes 3 more short stories, which are equally dark, suspenseful stories that explore themes of betrayal, violence, and existential despair. Together, these stories cement Kim Young-ha's reputation as one of Korea's most daring literary voices. His most recent novel to be translated, I Hear Your Voice, is a high energy, darkly imaginative novel that explores the underbelly of Seoul, following 2 childhood friends, Chae and Dongyu, as they navigate a world of crime, abandonment, and survival. Che, a charismatic, almost messianic figure, leads a biker gang of disaffected youth drawn to his supernatural ability to empathize with suffering, while Dongyu struggles with his own anxieties and a fractured past. The novel is filled with gritty realism, action packed storytelling, and deep existential themes, offering a raw depiction of runaways, corruption, and social neglect in South Korea's capital. Influenced by Christopher Nolan films, Japanese manga, and revolutionary figures like Che Guevara and Malcolm X, I Hear Your Voice is both a literary adrenaline rush and a profound meditation on identity and redemption. Kim Young has several novels and numerous short stories available in English translation, provide international readers with a unique window through which to view Korean culture. It's interesting to note that in recent years, Kim has stepped back from his reputation as Korea's most transnational or international writer. Living in New York for 2 years made him realize that he is at heart a Korean novelist. He has also grown somewhat ambivalent about translations of his work, saying they're like old ex girlfriends who turn up on his door holding a baby. It's nice to see them, but he can never be sure the baby is his. So, what do you think? Have you read any Kim Young-ha novels or short stories? What's your favorite of his books? please leave a comment, and don't forget to like the video to support the channel, subscribe for more deep dives into Korean literature, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new review. And of course, thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next video.